Ronnie Mitchem, a loving but no-nonsense U.S. Marine. He's preached across the continental United States, all over the world. He's an evangelist. He crafts the art of the win in football, and he builds young men. He's also head coach of the V&P Sharks high school football team 2012-2017, where the deplorable example demonstrated by Colin Kaepernick and then mimicked by millionaire athletes all over the NFL oozed over into Coach Mitchem's locker room. His life experiences as a former Marine, of course, once a Marine, always a Marine, and businessman enriched his calling and preaching style. And because of this, he's reached thousands for the cause of Christ. In and on the gridiron, in the streets, inside America's prison industrial complexes, he resides in Texas, down in Crosby with his wife. He got 3 kids, and he's a great guy. And I want to ask him a few questions about the state of sports today and just generally how you doing and what you've been preaching about lately. Ronnie, welcome to Arc Midnight. We had a good time when we talked on Caravan to Midnight, but it's good to have you on the over-the-air radio waves. So welcome.
Yes, sir. Well, it's good to be with you, John. Really enjoyed being with you on the other program. And, just been preaching. Of course, we're gearing up now for Christmas. And one of the things we preached just recently in November heavily was being thankful for all the things that we have. And one of the issues, we have is a generation of young people, it seems, that are being taught to not be thankful for the many blessings they have to live in such a great country as America.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It sure could be a lot worse. You don't have to go very far to find a worse situation. But, Ronnie, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I guess I just want to make sure that absolutely everybody hears it. But this soft chair, what my martial arts master wrote in one of his books was that there's no limit to a human being's laziness. They're standing up, in a little while they get tired of that, so they want to sit down. It doesn't make any difference how comfortable that chair is. Eventually they're going to want to lie down because the comfortable chair isn't comfortable enough. And again, I've said this many times, but I think we have been sitting in that soft chair for so long that it's made many people weak. They didn't see it coming, but it just sort of happened anyway.
I
definitely agree with that. How do you respond to such assertion? Do you?
Well, I agree with you. Absolutely. It's, my family, my mom grew up on a dairy and worked every morning before she went to school. And, she worked hard all her life to get everything she's got. She just recently has battled cancer twice in the last few years. She got an eye situation going on. But, nothing gets her down. She just keeps going. I think it was the way she was raised. And today, our generations have got softer and softer. Kids don't have to work like they did on the farms anymore, and we go to grocery stores and get what we need. And I think the generations have just become softer. Of course, people work hard. I'm not trying to take away from that in their jobs, but I'm just saying as a whole, children are raised a little bit more with the luxury life of, like you say, sitting around, kids playing video games. That's not the way other generations were raised. And so I think they don't really appreciate a lot of things they get now because of the simple fact it's sort of given to them instead of earned.
It's been said, and I agree with it, that the hardest work really is mental work. And I don't know how I'd hold up now. I suspect I'd be tighter than I was in other years, but everybody's got to work a construction job just to say they did. But
Right.
when you're a young person, when you're in your 20s or even your 30s or 40s, but certainly your 20s and 30s, you finish with that 8-hour day, and it was 9 hours altogether because you got an hour for lunch, fine. A lot of people just have to have their lunch right there at the place where they work. They don't get to go somewhere. There's not enough time to do it, even if they could leave the building. But the thing is, when you got off of work, oh man, that last hour and a half, you're kind of tired. But as soon as that old bell rings and you're ready to leave, here comes the energy again, and you're ready to go on with what remains of your afternoon and evening and all that. And I'm just wondering if maybe what's happened with people is that with all this computer stuff and all this databasing and all this staring at screens, I'm wondering if these computers, there's nothing we can do about it now, First one, I guess, was an abacus, right? But I'm wondering if that's causing the mental strain that is resulting in, what will eventually become sloth. They don't feel like doing anything because they've already been bombarded with so much mental stuff all day, just making sure they don't click the wrong thing and send the company into turmoil. I don't know. As I hear myself saying this, it seems like a little bit of a stretch. But why do you think people's attention spans, after 16 seconds now, they're starting to get irritated? They're irritated in traffic easier. When they're individually, they seem okay, and in small groups, they seem okay. But when you get a mass of them out there, they start getting agitated. And I'm just wondering, what's that all about?
Well, one of the things I kid my congregation about is I say, I know I've only got you for 8 minutes, then you're going to tune out because you're set on commercials, on television and so forth. So you're going to tune out on me, so I'll throw something in here to get your attention back. So I see it, in the people. When you're preaching, you can see how people fade in and out. And I think it is, like you say, a little bit of what we do, our normal routine of either computers, television, things, that sort of hold us for a short time, and then we drop off. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about. I believe that would be what I see going on.
What do you make of the NFL? Since football is preaching in football is what you do, training these young men to win these games, and in the process build self-esteem and all those things that go along with winning, which there's nothing wrong with that. Well, I was going to ask you about the NFL's making more money than ever before, and yet ratings are down close to 10% all the way back to 2017. And I'm just wondering if these protests, this taking of knees and so forth, has actually hurt the sport, hurt the NFL, hurt viewership, and just hurt in general.
Yeah, well, I know personally I haven't watched NFL in 3 years, so I just can't sit and watch people. My program, John, I had rules. The NFL has rules against what they did, kneeling, and but they went ahead and overlooked it and let it go on. And what happened was when they did that, they infected young minds in high school and junior high and all the way down to elementary kids playing ball. And, it didn't do anything good for our society, our country. It brought a lot of division. And, I just believe that that's the wrong way to teach young people. On our football field, we work them hard. My kids laugh, especially some of my older kids now. They'll talk to me and they laugh about the fact and say, Coach, you worked us so hard and ran us before practice, middle of practice, after practice. But we always learned when we got to the game the reason why, because we were in better shape than the other team. And, you get that mindset of trying to teach young people how you can reach more, you can do more if you apply yourself and give everything you have. And then you've got this detrimental thing going on in the NFL that could have been stopped. It should have never happened. Disrespecting just, today, Pearl Harbor, the great men, women that died in World War II. I had a great preacher friend of mine who served in the Marine Corps, served 3 years on the Pacific Islands. He came back with only, I think he said him and 5 other guys came back from his unit. The rest of them died on those islands fighting. And when we, teach kids that disrespecting the many things that people have sacrificed for you, that we end up creating a mindset that has no respect at all. And so I felt like this whole situation with kneeling brought about in the mindset of young people, I don't have to respect America. And, of course, we know that the socialists and communists and left-wingers, they want to bring up the new America. So they want to destroy the one we have. And the first way to do that is to get in the mind of those young people. So, we made rules that you don't do that on our team. We're going to show respect. I made my kids shake the referee's hands, show respect to the referees. There was no trash talking allowed to the other team. You did it between the whistles. And, that's sort of, I think it's just the opposite of what happened. And NFL helped bring all that about.
Mm-hmm. Here's one out of left field, even though that's kind of a baseball term. Sorry. But other than representing the school and building and, going, okay, these are our top athletes here, and look, there they go. They're kind of our gladiators in this controlled battle between these football players. What is really the point of teaching sports in schools? You know, the
Well,
whether it's baseball, basketball, or football. What are we trying to get? You started answering, and then I kept going. Go ahead. Sorry.
that's all right. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The main purpose is to teach young men discipline, character, class, how you represent yourself, represent others, and and also bring about a team atmosphere to where people can work together. It's a proven fact that kids who have played sports or some type of activity where they work with others, whether it's sports or, some other type of activity in school, when they join together to work as like a family, that they bring about better character in their kids, and they're able to go out even in jobs and be able to work with other people. In other words, assimilate and be able to be productive by, saying, okay, well, this guy may have this talent, but I got this talent. We work together. We create. Not everybody can throw a football, and believe me, not everybody can catch one. But not everybody can tackle well, but some people can block, but they can't tackle. So you got them on offense. You got to catch the ball. You got them receiving the ball. You don't send a guy that can't catch a ball out, to be a receiver. So these are things that, I think that you're hoping you instill in these young men. And, John, this may be a little bit off subject, but I think it's important. I had a young boy play for me about 4 or 5 years, and from junior high up. And he told his daddy took him to a job interview, and his daddy told me, he said, Coach, he said, when we got I was taking his first job interview, and said, I was telling my son, when you get there, do this, do that. And he said, Dad, I already know all this. And he said, well, how do you know it? He said, because Coach has been teaching me that for the last 4 or 5 years. And so I think sports can be a positive influence in young people's lives to help them once they get out of school, because they're not going to play football their whole life, but they can take a lot of things they learn on that football field and baseball field, whatever it may be, and take it into their life, and they help them be a productive person in our society.
You're in a position to observe whether or not a young man is struggling or not. It could be anything. His parents, teachers. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's not. Maybe there isn't any God in his house. Maybe there is no Jesus. Maybe there is no church. There's no spiritual compass. No guidebook.
Right.
Is this easy to spot? And how can you help him when you do spot it?
Well, we've had a lot of kids that come in that come from great families, and you don't have those issues. But then there's others. I can name just a couple. I had one young man who came in the program, never played football, and he was a 11th grader, going to have 2 years of football to play. And the whole story, I didn't know about it till he actually came to play for me. I sat down and talked with him, and he said, Coach, he said, you wouldn't want to come to my house because it looks like a drug dealer's house, a crack addict's house. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, you wouldn't want to come there. He said, I would be embarrassed you to come to my house. He said, as he started talking, he told me his dad had got killed a couple years before. The young man had a rough life. And, him and his family have told me after the football program that him coming in, being a part of our program, and us showing him love and acceptance and bringing him in and teaching him and motivating him to be a great young football player, that now he's serving in the United States Navy, and we're very proud of him. But, that's just one of the cases of many young men that needed some of that support.
All right. Well, let's get through this little commercial break coming up, and then let's talk about some other things. And hopefully we'll be spreading the word far and wide right now on the Bridge of the Ark. I am John B. Wells. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Ark Midnight, everybody. Our guest, Ronnie Mitchem. I want to ask you something, Coach, and here it is. Now, the condition of our country is one thing. I think we're trying to get it straightened up here a little bit, and obviously people are picking a side. I like that. I really do. They are deciding what news is believable, what news is not believable. If it's too confusing or seems too contrived, they just move on to something that they can actually wrap their minds around that might actually correspond to something they may actually be thinking based on their own observations. But I'm wondering about something. With all this stuff about, oh, good Lord, the stuff that's being taught in schools. Last week, I read this awful article about all kinds of things being simulated in these grades. Now, you teach high school, so that's one thing, but we're talking about elementary school through middle school here. Kids between third grade and eighth grade being taught techniques of, how to fillet somebody, buggery. One 16-year-old girl was supposed to simulate being, you're ready for it, it's the R word, everybody, raped in front of her classmates. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, and one false move, and now you've asked a girl out or something like that, and now you're in trouble for this because you're harassing her, and all of this stuff. And then there's the porn component and everything else, which seems to be robbing young men, by all accounts, of their sexuality altogether and just numbing them to it because women are placed in such degrading situations for these porn videos and so forth. So, wrapping that all up, here's the question. What is the biggest, the most dangerous trap or pitfall that America's teenage men, who are going to grow up and inherit this mess that the adults find themselves embroiled in, what is the biggest threat to them having any kind of a regular life, a regular productive life where they could actually be happy and feel fulfilled and have a family and all these things, you know? Where's the minefield?
Well, first of all, polluting the mind of our young people and twisting it. I don't believe in school at any age, really. There's no need for a lot of what's been, especially the sexual things. Those are not things that kids have to be taught, especially in school. It's ridiculous, and it's just corruption. It's perversion, and it's just the spirit of Antichrist is the way I describe it, as taking over the minds of our young people and twisting them. Young men, lives can be destroyed by that, because when these kids being taught that, well, now they're going to be thinking about those things. And then, you have such a road of destruction that comes from it that it's going to continue to hurt generations. I don't know why these individuals who feel this is curriculum that should be taught, especially to young children, how that the people over the school boards and in charge, how they feel how a kid anything good is going to come of that. These are things that are just ridiculous. Our society is falling back into the perversion of generations of civilizations that have destroyed themselves with their own perversion. And that's exactly what the door's been opened up to. And, the answer to all that is we need to be teaching about Christ, and that's why I encourage people with Christian schools and Christian homeschooling, because you send your kids to school for 8 hours today to be indoctrinated by their left-wing beliefs and their perversions, and then, you send them home, take them to church. No, we need to make sure our kids are not being these things have been forced in their minds and in their lives. These are just not things that need to be dealt with, especially with these young children like you were talking about. It's ridiculous.
And I'm wondering about, the estimates would suggest that about 3%, maybe 3%, somewhere between 1.5% and 3% of the people in the country, based on about, 330 million, I think it's more like 350, but that's just me, are gay. So what, in your opinion, is the big push behind this LGBT stuff? I mean, there were always gay people around.
Right.
I didn't see anybody beating up any homosexuals the entire time that I was in public school, over 12 years in Fort Worth, Texas. Are you kidding me? I never even heard of such a thing. So what is this all about? Just more of the spirit of Antichrist, or what?
Yeah, well, definitely. What they're doing, they're promoting it and pushing it and trying to corrupt the minds of young people, but in the process, they're trying to make them accept it. Now, you ask the majority of high school students who's graduated in the last 10 years, and you'll see, especially if you went back 20 and just start working your way up, that generation after generation, they've been pushing the gay agenda until the young people now feel that it's something wrong if they say, I don't agree with that. And so they want them to be accepted and just to bring that in. Of course, we know the whole reason is because the gay agenda is to try to pervert what God originally intended way to be, and that's for a man and a woman. And so the more you pervert, the less people believe in God. So people may get upset, but that's just the way I see it. I don't see any other purpose in it, and they continue to push it down our throats. And then you've got businesses who cave, people who cave, churches who cave. And, I've told my congregation, if, they try to make me do a gay marriage, you might as well come bail me out of jail, and I'll find out how many of you really support me and like me if you come bail me out, because I won't be doing a gay marriage. And these are things that, we just continue to surrender. And the more we surrender, the more ground they want. We see big businesses, Chick-fil-A, I think recently, they came after them, and I didn't understand all the details of what happened, but it looked like there was a little bit of caving there. I'm not talking against, the Chick-fil-A, because it's been a good organization, good place for kids to work, and good place to eat and take your family. But I'm just saying, each one, as we give a little ground, they take more ground, because they know that if we can corrupt the minds of our young people, you can take over a country.
I just got an email just this moment. It popped up here from David. Thanks for sending this, David. I was permanently banned from the University of New Mexico Law Library for asking a woman if I could buy her dinner. That was all he did. Permanently banned from the library. I mean, how far is this supposed to go before somebody just decides, you know what, maybe the university environment really isn't for me?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's get into that so much more here in just a minute. I hear the music coming up. You're going to be right there on the verge of telling us the meaning of life, and we're going to have to go, we've got to stop, and then we're going to lose it. But when we come back, I want to ask you what kind of restrictions are placed on you, if any, in preaching the gospel and running your church the way you see fit. And I'd be very interested to know if you're being leaned on, if there are any kind of imperial entanglements, as the first time I heard that was in Star Wars Episode 4, which was the first one. I never figured that out. Anyway, Ronnie Mitchem is our guest, ladies and gentlemen, and he's just a straight up, I spell M-A-N, who feels like the best way to serve is to serve the Lord, and from that, everything else follows. He helps young men become the spiritual heads of their households later in life, something that this culture seems to have abandoned in its quest for the perfect village that the leftists claim we need. Ronnie Mitchell, when it comes to preaching the gospel, what are the restrictions on does it depend on if your church is a 501c3, if you can talk about anything political or not? I mean, what kind of things does a preacher have to look out for these days?
Well, I think one of the big issues is what kind of church do you pastor and what do you preach, and what comes out of that pulpit determines by the congregation what they're going to listen to and what they believe. As far as the thing when they try to say about not preaching about politics. Okay, well, if it's moral issues, and so much in our politics now are trying to change the moral values of our world, our country, we most certainly have every right to speak out about it, and I do. I don't fear or worry about things from the government. If I did, I would never stood up for what I did about the kneeling. But in my pulpit, we preach Christ and Him crucified and risen, and the blood of Jesus, and that's what we tried to put on the football field. That's what we preach in our church. Everything centered around our ministry is about that. And so there's no way of getting around dealing with issues that are dealing with people's souls in eternity without offending somebody. So if you tiptoe around, you're just going to be a tiptoer, and you're going to end up, not accomplishing anything. I'm just pushing forward as far as what the government says or doesn't say. We had a mayor here in Houston who wanted a few years ago, a gay mayor, she wanted all the preachers' sermons to make sure none of them had anything to say about the LGB. And, hey, I'm not in the city of Houston. I'm on the outskirts, but I know the preachers that I spoke to and heard from and around this community, they were not happy with that and stood up to it. And she backed down on that very quickly.
Now, back a couple of years ago, you referenced this just a moment ago, 2 teenage football players protested during the national anthem against the wishes of their coach. That would be you.
Yes,
And
sir.
so how'd you handle that situation?
Well, the first thing we do when our boys show up, I mean, the very first day of practice, I show them how to shake hands, look a man in the eye, speak to them straight, looking at them like a man. And before each practice, when the coaches show up with the players, they have to shake every coach's hand when the coach comes up and address him and say, hello, coach. And at the end of practice, we shake hands because during that practice time, there's going to be some rough times where kids feel like you're getting on to them, but you're trying to make them a better football player. We all want to leave on good terms. So I told my players, you're not going to kneel. We're not going to have that here. This program is built on character, respect, on Christ. We emphasize Christ on everything we do on that football field, and we're not going to show disrespect. And so when the two players did, I immediately went to the one that knelt, and I shook his hand, told him, said, thank you for your time as Shark, but your time as Shark is done, because our team rules were if you knelt during the national anthem, you'd no longer be a Shark football player. And so they were removed off the team. And, everybody in my church and on the football program and everybody even on the other team was a total agreement because none of the other teams wanted any of that on the football field. Didn't need it. It's supposed to be everybody working together. We didn't need the division, and we didn't want no part of it. So, and being, had served in the Marine Corps, very personal to me also, and I hear a lot of people jab and say, well, it has nothing to do about you being in the Marines. It was for this reason, that reason. There's no reason to disrespect your country, especially when you live in the greatest country on the face of the earth that's ever been, and you're going to show disrespect. That's not going to be on my football field. I don't care if the NFL and if everybody in the country said, hey, that's the right thing to do, it was not going to happen on my football field. So I treated them with respect, but then I was accused of making them strip on the sideline, and you name it. The media came after me, and it was quite an ordeal.
And how'd that wrap up finally?
Well, it wrapped up by two players staying off the team. Of course, news media came down on me, every news source, and I had New York Times, CNN, you name it. Everybody was trying to, come after me and accuse me of having racial issues about it. There was no racial issue whatsoever. I don't care who it was, and I'm pro-life. If it had been pro-lifers kneeling, disrespecting the flag, I felt the same way. I just don't believe it's the right thing to do. I think it sends the wrong message to our young people, and I didn't want any part of it. So, I was attacked, and so I wrote my book to explain what happened and tell my side of the story because, the news media was not going to allow me to do that because they set a narrative of what they felt like I was and who I was and why I did what I did.
So, seeing as how this is Pearl Harbor Day and all, which got very little coverage, did you see very much mention of Pearl Harbor Day at all? I hope you did, but I didn't.
I didn't. No, I did not.
Well, serving as a U.S. Marine, and as folks, as you know, the Marines and the Navy are real close. The daily routine of honoring the flag and what it really means. Just speak to us a little bit about that, Ronnie, so that people get it, that it's, because I take it that those players that you said, you're not on the team anymore, I told you, you broke the rules, that's it. We're not bending them for you. The rule is the rule. They were valuable players. You didn't really want to lose these guys. I mean, did you lose a state championship over this or something, or compromise it in some way? I mean, what happened there?
Well, we were on our way to state championship, and everybody knew it. With those two players and the rest of my team that I had, we were on our way to a state title. And but no title is worth losing and teaching young men to disrespect their country and disrespect the men and women who fought and died for our right, for freedom to play on that Friday night. And so, being a Marine, I remember laying, and one of the last things we would do many nights in our barracks and boot camp at Parris Island, we would lay still in attention on our bunk and sing the national anthem. I mean, not the national anthem, but sing the Marine Corps hymn. And when we sung that, it'd echo off that barracks, and you couldn't help but think about the men, the potential were in that barracks that you're laying in who have fought and died for your country. One of the big things when you get there to Parris Island, you step out on the yellow footprints. And I remember thinking, I just remembered as I'm sitting here today talking with you, thinking about I might be in the footprints of somebody won the Medal of Honor. This is it goes deeper than some people just think nothing of it. But there are people who have sacrificed. I mean, our country would not be here today. Most of the world wouldn't be free if it wasn't for America. We have fought, shed our blood to give people freedom. And when people disrespect that and take it lightly, I like to describe it like this, John. The cross represents for all Christians. There may be different views that Christians have on what the Bible says, their doctrine, but the one thing that brings us all together is the fact of that cross, of what Christ did on the cross. So that cross represents the work that Christ did to set all men free. And I think the symbol of the American flag is the same way, should be to our country. That should be one time.